Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the virtual home of Princeton Public Library here on Zoom. My name is Janie Herman, and I am the Adult Programming Manager at the Princeton Public Library. It is my distinct pleasure to host this evening's author event, where Ben Okri will be in conversation with Professor Chika Okeke-Agulu. Before I begin, I would like to thank Jessica Greer of the Other Press for the assistance with arranging the details, Labyrinth Books of Princeton for partnering and being our bookseller, and the program in African Studies at Princeton University for their co-sponsorship and the promotion of this event. If you'd like to purchase any of Ben Okri's books tonight, I will be putting the links in the chat for you to order online from Labyrinth, and you can get them with a 10% discount by using a code Okri at checkout. Labyrinth also carries many other titles that I'm sure will be of interest, and you can go in person to shop as well, and just mention that you are at this event to get a discount on Ben Okri's books. Please note that this event is being recorded and it will go up on our library's YouTube channel within a few days. If you have friends or colleagues who could not make it tonight, let them know that it has been recorded and they can check our YouTube channel. And I will also put that link in our chat for easy access. I will now introduce our guests by asking them to turn on their cameras to join us on the screen. During their conversation, please feel free to ask questions using the Q&A function for any of our panelists to answer at the end of the conversation. One of Nigeria's most celebrated authors, Ben Okri is the author of many post-colonial novels, poetry, short story collections, and essays. With his new eco-fable, Every Leaf a Hallelujah, and a revised edition of his 1995 novel, Astonishing the Gods, his voice is as vital and resonant as ever. He won the Booker Prize in 1991 for The Famished Road, and his novel, Astonishing the Gods, was selected as one of the BBC's 100 novels that shaped our world. He is considered one of the foremost African authors in the postmodern and post-colonial traditions. In addition, he is the author of numerous collections of poetry. Chika Okeke-Agulu is an Igbo-Nigerian artist, curator, and art historian. He is a professor in the Department of Arts and Archaeology and the Department of African American Studies, and also the director of the program in African Studies at Princeton University. I'd like to welcome both of you here to our virtual space. We are looking forward to this conversation. So I'm going to see myself out, and I'll be back at the end for the Q&A portion.
Okay, thank you so much, Jenny, for the introduction. It's really, truly a great pleasure and honor to Ben, to have this conversation with you this evening. I know it's probably early morning. So it's gonna be a great time. I promise you that, and our audience that. To have this opportunity to talk, exchange ideas around your work, specifically the two novels that are being presented publicly today and in the past few weeks. So I want to emphasize again how deeply honored, Ben, that I feel to.
Chika, the honor and the pleasure is all mine. It's I've been wanting to meet you for a long time, and here we're doing it virtually, but someday we'll do it over pepper soup and palm wine, I hope.
That's a promise, and I'm going to keep to that, probably somewhere in Lagos. So let's, what we're going to do is to roam a little bit first around Astonishing the Gods, and probably read a few pages, here and there, and then we'll move on to Every Leaf a Hallelujah, and also read some pages from there. And then in the end, we would open up some space for Q&As. I'm sure that our audience are dying and living, thinking about the paradoxes, right, of Astonishing the Gods, which I'll come to shortly. But we will entertain some questions at the end. So if you don't mind, I want to jump right into it. Yeah?
Please, absolutely.
Okay. Okay, so here's, I've been struggling with this problem. I got the advanced copy of Astonishing the Gods, which I had read before, and saw that there's a foreword for the US edition. And I said, thank God, finally, Ben is going to unknot some of the really naughty issues around Astonishing the Gods. Well, I'm not sure how I feel about getting to the end of the foreword and wondering, okay, here he goes again. So let me explain what I mean. In the preface, I was hoping that you would help us get a little bit understanding of the circumstances around the writing of the novel. You mentioned some incident in London that might have catalyzed, but you don't tell us what that is. You go back to the same paradoxical statements that have left our readers completely astonished. In other words, reading the novel, I don't think it's the gods that are astonished, it's actually readers like me that are completely astonished by the narrative, by the incredible lyrical maneuvers that you do in the novel. And then you invoke Eshu, the god of the crossroads of the Yoruba. And this is supposed to be a foreword. So you left me as astonished as I was reading the previous editions of the novel. So let me ask you then, can you help us think about the big question that led you to writing this novel? Because frankly, if it's a monument, as the BBC has declared, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that everyone who has read this novel is completely overtaken, right, by both the lyrical density of the narrative, but also this idea that, yeah, we need to be more intelligent to get it. And at the same time, you are encouraged to think that you don't have to be self-conscious to acquire knowledge. This is the kind of paradoxical moments that go that we see throughout the entire novel. So could you help us think, right? Pretend that you're a reader. Help us think what the narrative, what the technique of writing this novel meant to you then and now.
Well, Chika, you said so many wonderful and astonishing things yourself that I don't quite know where to begin, except to begin with a smile and to say, well, thank you very much for the intensity of your question. I think the first thing I want to say about Astonishing the Gods is that it was written to be read in a certain way. It's about a very, very human, anguished, difficult, and intimate subject. It's And because of that, it had to be written in a way that was folded and paradoxical, because I want readers to come back to it and read not just the sentences, but the sentences in between the sentences. And the novel is full of clues. Now, if I wrote an introduction sort of bearing these clues, and I would have rendered meaningless the novel I just taken such trouble to write. It is meant to be unpacked. The intelligence required to unpack it is the intelligence that every single human being possesses. It's the intelligence that a child has when they look at something long enough and suddenly see that the shadow of a leaf can also look like a giant, and can also look like an egungun, and can also look like somebody dancing. In other words, I trust, I think practically in all of my books, I think this is a novel in which I most trust the intuition of the reader. And I stress the word intuition rather than intelligence, because intelligence, you can unpack things yourself by thinking logically and working things out, and picking the clues here, picking the clues there. But intuition is something that is deep inside you. It has to do with your instincts. It has to do with your awareness, personal awareness, and you know. So these are the things. If you listen to the novel, if you take the trouble to read it out aloud or read it to yourself over and over again, certain things will start to come through that may not have been visible the first time or the second time. One, a young man has left his home because he thought he was invisible. But of course, he wasn't invisible, because his mother could see him and he could see his people were real, and so on and so forth. But something made him think he was invisible. And he went out into the world to go look for the people who are visible, and see what they look like. Yeah. He travels over 7 years. I don't tell you about those 7 years in which he encounters all kinds of people, because those 7 years are actually not very interesting. They might be interesting for another kind of narrative of travel and adventure and going to different towns and different people and having experiences there. That kind of adventure has been written about, you know, fully.
Yeah, but it also reminds one of the narrative of the lost years, right? The lost years of Christ, right? He was born a young man, and then 30 years later, he surfaces, and you wonder what happened all these many years. But he comes out at 30, this really messianic, right, figure.
Exactly. And so exactly, I love that you chose that narrative. And so you have in a narrative like that a life of two parts. One part is invisible and another part is visible. And the part that is visible is the one that has the greatest impact on us, the greatest impact on civilization, on society, individual lives, so on and so forth, on history. But the visible part that had the impact on us depends completely on the invisible part that we know nothing about. It's that paradox that I find very fascinating. Now, he comes to an island of people who have chosen, because of the great suffering that they went through, they have chosen to live their lives invisibly, because they discovered something about visibility, which was part of their suffering. So they have chosen to create the greatest civilization that they could possibly create, but invisibly. Now, this is a triple paradox, because someone who is invisible goes in search of visibility, travels for 7 years, an invisible period of time, arrives at an island where the people are invisible, and yet he can see the artifacts, the architecture, the sculpture, all the public aspects of their civilization, but not the people themselves. And for me, this is where the real wonder of the story begins. Beyond that, one can't say much more except to say, go read this book. Go read this book with new eyes.
Oh yeah. So the beauty and sublimity of this novel, really. And I call it novel with hesitance, right? It's because I know you insist on the primacy of poetry, right? In your work, you identify with poetry. It's almost like a poet who writes novels, right? The way you think about your work. And that is so self-evident in Astonishing the Gods. It might as well be poetry because of the sort of lyrical fantasy, if you will, that that you see as you read from one line to the other. It's like the beauty of the words themselves, the composition of the words themselves, are what I find really astonishing, right? And so in the same way that you sometimes feel diminished, right, when you encounter great poetry, right, that you wonder how it is possible for a mind to suture, arrange, compose words in such an amazingly lyrical fashion. That's what you feel. There's a certain sort of enjoyment of words, the color, the texture of words throughout the entire narrative. And so I begin to wonder, how difficult was it for you to write this? I know you had written the narrative in one go, and then like poets do, go back and fill in elements of it. But still, if not how long, but how tasking was it for you to write this narrative with a kind of, what I still want to call lyrical density? It's almost as if it requires so much energy, right? Mental and all of that to keep this language, to keep this really astonishing imagination, aside from the story itself, what you're doing technically, right, with language in the entire novel. So if you can help me a bit, how difficult, perhaps, but at least how tasking was it for you writing this narrative?
Well, I've been carrying the gem of the idea, Chika, in my head practically all my life. The first thing I wanted to write when I was a kid, long before I actually thought about writing, the first thing I wanted to write was a story of a man who arrives on a strange island. Now, when you carry the gem of an idea for most of your life, it gathers underneath in your subconscious, deep down inside you. It starts to gather an incrustation. It becomes encrusted with all kinds of material, all kinds of energies, all kinds of pain, all kinds of pearls, all kinds of possibilities, all kinds of images, just underneath there, sitting, waiting, yeah? Now, often these things sit there and wait, never come to the surface, never hit the page. But this year, it was 1995, if I remember rightly. It was the summer of 1995. A strange thing happened to me, which I'm not going to go into because it diminishes the inspiration. Sometimes something happens and it inspires something that is much greater than the thing itself. And you don't want to talk about the thing that inspired it because it diminishes it. Something happened and that triggered open this thing I've been carrying inside me. At the same time, I had been fasting. I can't remember why I began fasting, but I went through an intense period of fasting. And this trigger thing happened. And I remember coming back home, I suddenly understood who these people were. I suddenly understood the charge that I've been carrying around inside me. And I came home, opened the black notebook, and I just began to write. Now, you talk about the lyrical density of how it is. Now, you should have seen the way it is in the first draft. It was much worse. It was much worse. I had to, you know, like origami, sometimes you put it in water and then it fluffs out and becomes more. Well, I had to put this thing in water to sort of origami it, to let it fill out and flesh out and breathe, as it were. So your instinct is absolutely right. It was a bolt of a release of energy combined with this strangely spiritual state in which I'd been lingering for about a month, combined with the fact that it was a strange summer. It was 1995. I was perched between this sense of solitude, this sense of a whole community of people who had suffered for so long and had finally found a way to turn that suffering into something tremendously and secretly meaningful. And this bolt just came out, and I just, like you said, just wrote this thing, and then I took a lot of time working on it, just making sure that that it wasn't just poetry, but that it breathed into narrative. And a lot of time, I always was aware that it was going to be a very difficult book, that a lot of people won't understand it because people might just read the surface. It was one of the danger of a book like this is that you read the surface, you read this thing about invisibility. And if you've got a problem with invisibility yourself, because you're suffering from it in some way, you might resent it. And there was a bit of that at the beginning. But, you know, if you go below it, the invisibility turns into something else. It turns into great power and great poise and great poetry, you know, because it's a book about depths. It's this encrusted depth I've been talking about found its perfect metaphor in the depth of a society that had gone into kind of hiding. I must confess, I found a strange parallel with this book in some of the themes of the movie Black Panther. I found that most peculiar. It was the same idea of people in a space like Africa going invisible and creating this incredible life. I was struck by that.
I was actually going to bring that up. The sort of the imaginative leaps that it had to take to rethink the possibilities, right, of an Africa that was stillborn, right, at least historically, to, well, what a lot of people think of these days as Afrofuturism, or Afrofuturisms, if you ask me. But I think one of the things that pervades this narrative, as you point out, is this question of visibility and invisibility. And I would like for us to read a little bit at this moment, because it's almost a metaphysics of invisibility, the entire narrative, that one might think of Ralph Ellison's, you know, The Invisible Man, but it's in the way that you tie invisibility to states of consciousness, or states of consciousnesses, in fact, if there's ever a word like that, that keeps what one might think of as the paradoxical balance, right, of both the narrative and the subjectivity of this young man that is in quest, right, of both himself, his world, his past, his future, and even his imagination, right? So I would like to read, and then
wonderful,
and then you read.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yeah.
I was hoping you'd read.
Yes. So, as he went, he heard strange whisperings within him, as if many voices in code were reciting gently into his heart and spirit all the laws of known and unknown universes. He had always thought of himself as invisible. He had always thought that invisibility was the worst thing that could befall a person or a people. But as he went under the beautiful power of the radiant wings hovering between earth and star, it occurred to him that he was becoming more invisible than he had ever known before, more invisible than he ever suspected was possible. It frightened him that there were gradations of invisibility, gradations and depths. His mind spun in the pure horror of this notion. He felt himself sinking into those depths as he passed beneath the charged immanent wings. And as he sank deeper into into new invisibilities, he had a sudden monstrous suspicion of the endlessness of it, the bottomlessness of it, till he could imagine a state of invisibility that shaded into the eternal, the infinite. So I just wanted to give us a flavor of these layers, densities, right, of invisibility that that runs through this narrative, right? So if you could help us with your favorite page that you would like to read for us, and then we'll continue.
Yes, okay. The page I'd like to read is not my favorite page. I don't really have a favorite page.
Okay.
But the page I'm going to read is actually in some ways a dialogue with you, Chika. So we'll see. 7. Page 66, by the way, if you have a copy and you want to follow me. Suddenly, he saw the city as a vast network of thoughts. Courts were places where people went to study the laws, not places of judgment. The library, which he took to be one building, but which he later discovered was practically the whole city, was a place where people went to record their thoughts, their dreams, their intuitions, their ideas, their memories, and their prophecies. They also went there to increase the wisdom of the race. Books were not borrowed. Books were composed there and deposited. The universities were places for self-perfection, places for the highest education in life. Everyone taught everyone else. All were teachers, all were students. The sages listened more than they talked. And when they talked, it was to ask questions that would engage endless generations in profound and perpetual discovery.
Fantastic. You know, that section, right, of the story, it's really, truly amazing. How you're imagining, or the protagonist, right, is imagining and encountering, right, these fugitive realities, right? So he's almost always perched on the boundaries, right, of being and becoming, being and nothingness, right? Reality and its opposite. And he's always not sure which side of this boundary that he, or even these being things, right, that are accompanying him, you're not sure if they're human-like things or just pure manifestations of energy, right? And at this moment when you're describing the city, you almost want to be there. But it's also these fantastic imaginings that are made possible by suffering or the experience of suffering, right? And that's what then stops you short, right? Do I really want this thing so much that I wish I had suffered as much as the society that are able to build these institutions, construct these amazing, and by the way, the colors in this novel, right? The painterly, almost expressive palette that you construct throughout the novel as an art historian, that's so close to my heart, right? And I thought I have to mention that. So I'm tempted to read something else that.
Oh, please, Chika, please don't be tempted. Do it.
Comes a bit close to what this incredible moment, right, in the story, and that's 9. That's page 69. He was surprised to know in a flash, without being told, that banks were places where people deposited or withdrew thoughts of well-being, thoughts of wealth, thoughts of serenity. When people were ill, they went to their banks. When healthy, they went to the hospitals. The hospitals were places of laughter, amusement, and recreation. They were houses of joy. The doctors and nurses were masters of the art of humor, and they all had to be artists of one kind or another. It was a unique feature of the place, but the hospitals had their facades painted by the great masters of art. They were some of the most beautiful and harmonious buildings in the city. Merely looking at them lifted the spirits. The masters of the land believed that sickness could be cured before it became sickness. The healthy were therefore presumed sick. Healing was always needed and considered a necessary part of daily life. Healing was always accompanied by the gentlest music, right? So really incredible, right? Passages like this, and there are lots of them throughout the entire story, right? What is healing, right? What does the healthy life constitute of? What is the art of being healthy, right? So it's almost like we're thinking about an utopia, but it's not quite so. It's actually a kind of fantastic version of what one might ever imagine utopia to be, right? That is ultimately real and permanently unreal. And that's something that you see go on. And that's why I think this young man is perpetually astonished, right, by both his quest and what he's seeing as he goes. Let you add something to that or pivot to something else. But I want for us to dwell on this just a little bit more and turn our attention to Every Leaf a Hallelujah.
Well, Chika, I think one thing I responded to in the book that's very, very, very moving to me is the presence of art in that civilization, and the presence of art in the book itself, in the writing of it, and in the inspiration of it, because it was inspired if you know your art, if you know your art history and you read the book, you should be able to sense certain texts, certain paintings, certain sculptings, certain they're all there, lending their fragrance in the background to this, because I've borrowed a lot to populate this civilization, this evanescent, invisible civilization that the young man is only going to experience just this once, which is why there's this great intensity in the description of it. It's just this once. And I think what the civilization teaches him more than anything else is that once is everything. And it is what happens to us in life. We experience, and half the time we don't experience. But it's experience in our experience, which is the key to the reading of this book, you know. The book was really intended to be a challenge to the experience of reading itself. I'm fascinated by the way in which we live the way we read, which is to say, we live as lazily as we read. We are as casual in our living, as unnoticing in our living as we are in our reading. And the book was meant to be in some ways a constant pull and snag to the eye and to the sensibility. Anyway,
Wonderful.
I've talked enough
Wonderful.
about Astonishing the Gods.
Yeah, we can spend the next 96 hours, nonstop, talking about this amazing, incredibly powerful narrative that is Astonishing the Gods. Now, the mode of writing Astonishing the Gods sort of changes in some dramatic ways. In Every Leaf a Hallelujah. Well, one is that you are consciously writing for young readers, but also that's also a book that any adult will thoroughly enjoy. You're not known for writing for the young readers. At the same time, this is a book on a topic that is so urgent, right? And at the same time, it's a fairy tale. So could you talk a bit about, one, why you decided to write for young readers on a topic that is about, the changing climate, the destruction of forests and plant life, other forms of life, really, not just plant life, by humanity. Why was it important to you to talk to or write for young readers primarily, even though adults like me thoroughly and truly enjoyed reading the book as well?
Well, Chika, I don't know if people are aware of it, but it is in some ways quite terrifying to write for young for young audiences, because you can't waffle, you can't get away with stylistic stuff. You have to be truthful. You have to be enchanting. You have to be realistic. Because if you've ever read to children, they can spot the minute something is not real.
Yeah.
They just see holes straight away, and they ask you questions, and they destroy with a single question a carefully built up architecture that you think you had constructed. So for me, actually, it really came down to a sense of the urgency. I grew up with all these forests in Nigeria. And for me, those forests were an intrinsic part of the spiritual strength and the cultural magnificence of the land, as well as, and indeed, an intimate part of my own identity. The forests were places of storytelling, of mythology, places of power, places of regeneration, places of healing. We talked about healing earlier. And over the years, I've noticed these forests disappear. In Lagos, in Ughelli, in Warri, in Agbo, my mother's place, my father's places, villages that I visited and grew up in. The forest just disappeared, vanished. And these things have had their place in my work. They're there in Famished Road. They're there in my early novels and early stories. But I just wanted to address it because I felt the urgency of it much more strongly these last 5 years. Now, one can't tell a story about the whole climate change issue. It's too big. I just wanted to tell a story of one thing that I knew personally, felt very strongly about, and would give me the vehicle by which to speak of the whole climate catastrophe that's hanging over us, and the courage and the simplicity of spirit and humility and strength of mind and of will that is going to take us to reverse this almost irreversible situation in which we now find ourselves, and which we're every day not addressing, and every day is getting worse. And I wrote for you, and I wrote for younger people. For me, I wrote for the eternal child in all of us. I always say it's for people between the age of 5 and 105. But I wrote for the eternal child in us because it is the younger ones who are proven to be more responsive to this issue. They've made it their personal campaign. They've made it their personal mission. They feel it more strongly. We older ones, we're the ones who have helped to bring it about and have done very, very little about it in all the years that we've been here. This is a celebration of a generation of consciousness and conscience, and it had to be a girl for many reasons. I needed her courage. I needed her extreme youth. It's the story of a girl who has to go find a flower to save her mother, and in doing so saves the forest near her, at great risk to herself. For me, it's a story about the forest, and a story about a girl, and a story about a sickness of the mother. But those stories also stand for all of us. The forest is us, and we're losing it, and we're dying. The sickness is us. We are sick. As a race, we are profoundly sick. But the girl is also us.
Yeah.
We have the courage, we have the possibility, we have the will to turn this thing around, to do something about it. And
yeah, no, it's a story that resonates with me personally. Having grown up in a home where, as a child, I would go with my father into the forest to find herbal, medicines, for, all kinds of illnesses. And
Absolutely.
I also saw these trees destroyed in my part of Eastern Nigeria for all kinds of reasons, by religious fanatics, and not just, people looking for lumber, but people who thought that these ancient forests were evil forests that needed to be destroyed, when in fact they were storerooms of pharmacopoeia, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's a story that really resonates with me a lot. One of the things that I find also quite compelling in this is the way that you sort of posit a different kind of imaginary, right? In our present day, it's all about data and facts and numbers, right? Rising sea levels and all of that. But you approach the same problem and question through a kind of fantastic imagination. Perhaps I think because that allows for room to still be positive, right? About the potential for change, rather than be completely swamped by the hegemony of data, right? Of documentaries and so forth. And that's why at moments in the novel, where you're describing different kinds of trees. You go from the real, like the sequoias or the baobabs and the Bristol cone pine, and then to Anunuebe, right? This mythic tree, right, among the Igbo. So it's almost as if you're also playing, right, or teasing the eco-critics, if you will, right? That you have to have a dose of imagination to actually address these hardcore, supposedly real issues and questions of our day. I
Absolutely.
think this is the power of the narrative that you've laid out in this novel, in this narrative. I'll read just a small section. I know we're running short of time, but I cannot resist doing that.
Chika, please, you
yes.
read so beautifully. So
in a flash, Mangoshi, this is the young girl, was back in the forest. She woke up at the foot of the tree. Dawn was beginning to show in the sky. It was quite cold. She still hadn't found the flower. She stood up and was about to go deeper into the forest when she noticed the clearing all around her. The trees that were there had gone. It was now an open space. Then she saw all these large machines standing around, and while she stared, men came through the clearing with chainsaws and machines. "What are you doing there?" one of the men shouted. "I'm looking for a flower for my mother who is sick," said Mangoshi. "Take her to the hospital. There are no flowers here," said the man. "What are you doing?" Mangoshi asked. "We've come here to cut down this tree," he said, pointing to the baobab. "Why do you want to cut it down? What has it done to you?" "You're a child. You don't understand these things," said the man. "I understand that you want to kill this tree for no good reason, and I won't let you," said Mangoshi. So that's the brave young girl, standing up for this tree against the supposedly all-knowing adults. I think that it captures the spirit, right, of the narrative.
And Chika, I also want you to consider the fact that within the laws of the state, this young girl is against the law. Yeah. She is breaking the law. Because the people who have come to cut down the trees have the law on their side. This paradox is invisible in the way I've told it, but the minute she stands up to defend this tree, she has, in effect, become an outlaw.
Yes. Incredible, and that's really the challenge of the moment, that it's the adults that make the laws, is the youth that have the ability to challenge those laws. And without that, change is not ever going to be possible.
It's not going to be possible.
Part of the narrative, part of the idea that this story conveys. Finally, tell me how you came about working with Diana.
Diana,
beautifully, wonderfully, incredibly, powerfully illustrated this story. That's why I had to have it on the screen so people get a feel of the amazing work that she did. So, did you find her? Did she find you, or was it a matchmaker?
It was a match made in artistic literary heaven. Clearly. No, we had the story, and with my publishers, we sought, we looked, and we went through so many artists, so many wonderful artists out there, and we found Diana's work. She does beautiful work for the New Yorker. She's an artist in her own right, a wonderful artist, and we got in touch with her. She was very moved because she's a fan of the Famished Road, and she was in Ouagadougou. at the time, and she read the story and went straight to the forest, and then came back to Italy because she's half Italian, half Nigerian.
Yes.
And we gave her no specific briefs. We just said, Diana, we want you to be completely free, respond to this thing completely in your own spirit. And that's what she did. Every now and again, these pages would turn up in the office and would turn up on my computer, and I could hear them gasping with delight.
Incredible.
Yeah, absolutely incredible. Absolutely. Very fortunate to have made this beautiful connection with Diana, who's just become a mother. So Diana, if you're watching this, lots of love.
Yes, I can't stop crowing really about the amazing work that she did for an incredible story, which sort of reminds me of the collaboration between Chinua Achebe and Chika Okeke.
Yes, beautiful.
For the second edition of Things Fall Apart.
Things Fall Apart, yes.
So this is, once in a while, it's such an intense pleasure to see an artist and a writer meet at this wavelength. And this book, both the narrative and the illustration, is what comes out of it. So at this moment, we'll see if we have a couple of questions from our readers, from our audience, and hopefully, Ben, you wouldn't mind taking some questions.
Well, it'd be a pleasure.
Yeah, so hi, that was such a great conversation. And I just want to chime in to say, we've added this book to the library's collection, and we have our Environmental Film Festival coming up at the library. It's their 16th annual Environmental Film Festival. And as part of the film festival, we make our top 10 books for kids and top 10 books for adults for environmental themes. And your book has been added. We couldn't decide whether to put it on the adult list or the children's list because we felt it was relevant to both, but we went back and forth. So many of our librarians have read Every Leaf a Hallelujah, and we can't wait to share it with the community and have it, integrated into the Princeton Environmental Film Festival as one of our recommended reading choices by our staff. So, it is rare that you get that combination of that beautiful artwork and that story and that fable.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yes.
It is a beautiful book. So what is it that you're working on now? Or do you have something else happening in your pipeline?
Oh yes, I always have something. Sometimes I think I have three hands. Yes, I'm working on poetry. Poetry is always, as Chika said earlier, always been knitted. Always been knitted and shaped. It just takes a long time. If you look at my works of poetry, there's about 7 years between them, because of the time it takes to make them and the time it takes to form a family of them. And there's some fiction and one or two interesting surprises, but surprises are best left in the air, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah. We do have
it was truly something the other day listening on BBC, the program that they did with you about the gestation, right, of poetry, right? It was such an amazing episode, that program last week. So I thought that was marvelous.
Yes, that was a strange time because it was the End SARS campaign in Nigeria. That was kind of sweeping the world at the same time. Yeah.
Okay.
So we have lots of people in the chat offering up about how beautiful the book is and how much they enjoyed the conversation. But I think, Chika, you've done such a great job of the interview that for once we have a Princetonian audience that doesn't have many questions. It's very unusual. But that's great. I think that just means that you touched on so many great points.
Yeah, you've anticipated so much.
Yes.
Well done. Wonderful.
It's an incredible opportunity to really get to talk and share these ideas. And of course, the audience can always reach out.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Publisher if they have questions and.
I think one thing that is worth drawing attention to are the unintended links and similarities between both books, even though almost 27 years divides them. But some strange links. Again, the presence of visibility, invisibility. This what you call fantasy, but I call a higher kind of reality. The travel through the world of trees, and the journey to an invisible island. They're both making journeys, aren't they? They're both making very brave journeys of identity. It's just strange how 27 years and some of the same themes, it just runs underneath without you planning it. That
says something about the fact that it's both works by Ben Okri. The mind is still exploring, is still traveling across seas of ideas and mountains of concepts, right? And manifesting in one or other narrative, but you find that certain modalities, right, are retained or stay for a while and morph into something else, and you can trace and track them as they move. What it says is really the migration, right, of the imagination, which is something that lies at the core, right, of your literary work. I think that's part of your genius, frankly, as a writer. Of incredible power.
You know, Chika, every now and again I try and write something completely unlike myself, and I'm appalled afterwards to find that it's actually more like myself than I could have intended. I find that very annoying.
Fantastic.
So again, both of these, all of Ben's books are available at Labyrinth Books, right on Main Street there in Princeton on Nassau Street. You can go over and purchase them in person if you live in town, or you can use the link and have them sent to your house. And I encourage you to do so. And I actually think that Every Leaf a Hallelujah would make a great gift for any child, and would encourage people to do that. Yeah. And also, Ben, I want to say, like, when your next book of poetry comes out, you should come to Princeton once this pandemic has calmed down.
He's coming back.
He will come physically. I would love that.
I would love that.
Yes. We have a really, Princeton University, the Lewis Center has the Atelier there has a really strong poetry program. And Paul Muldoon, I think it's biannual poetry festival that he puts on, International Poetry Festival, which is just so wonderful to attend. So we want you to come back and do poetry.
Yes, that would be great. That would be great.
Yes,
excellent,
fantastic.
Yes, thank you both to both of you for this wonderful conversation tonight. And I'm going to close down the Zoom.
And thank you so much for hosting us. And look after yourselves, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
And pepper soup.
Yes, and the pepper soup. Good to go. Good night.
Bye-bye.
All righty. Bye.